All right, so the other day I did a video concerning the death of Graydon Jerome Parker, 54-year-old U.S. veteran who was killed in the custody of Wayne County Jail on May 21st, 2017. In that video, I gave the name of the 6 officers who were listed in a news article as having beaten him, tased him, sprayed him with mace, and basically caused his death on that day. Those officers' names was listed in the video, as well as the lawsuit and pretty much the overall aftermath of that situation. However, since then I received a phone call from an anonymous caller, but this anonymous caller alerted me to the fact that no, those 6 officers you mentioned, there were more people involved and more people listed in the lawsuit. And one of the names he mentioned was current Lieutenant Ryan Narron. And when I asked, okay, well, why wasn't his name listed? And he informed me that his mother was a major. And so that made sense. And so I started to dig, and I wanted to find information concerning the other parties, because in the article that I read, they said it was 15 other people who were actually sued as a part of that lawsuit. And come to find out, yes, the current Lieutenant Ryan Narron, as well as the current Sheriff Larry Pierce, were 2 of the major defendants in that lawsuit. And this is not just hearsay. What you're looking at is a document. I know you can't read it, so I'm going to read it to you, but this is the document from the United States District Court for the Eastern District of North Carolina, and it is the complaint from Margaret Jean Kelly, who is the surviving mother of the deceased Mr. Jerome Parker. And this lists her as the plaintiff, and it lists these individuals: Wayne County, which is the whole county; Lawrence M. Pierce Jr., he's the second defendant; Western Surety Company, now that is a health agency that was supposed to be providing mental health service for mentally ill prisoners, and I'm going to get to that in a minute; Willie D. Sparks; Ryan A. Narron; Anthony Santagata; Lewis Garner; Xavier Lee, which was mentioned in the other video; Brent Woodall, who was also mentioned; Jose Arias; Robert Hines; Nathaniel Neal; Charles Granger. All of those were mentioned in the other video. So those are the only 6 parties that I mentioned. Also, Southern Health Partners, which is the company that provides mental health services, and also Christina Driver, which is an LPN. Now, this document is 64 pages long, but I'm just going to give you a quick summary. Now, if anybody wants this document, you can just reach out to me either by phone, 919-587-7782, or you can email me at taylorpublishinghouse@gmail.com. But this document pretty much places the blame on now current Sheriff Larry Pierce in his inability, and it shows deliberate indifference for providing his deputies with training on mental health patients, but also their indifference of treatment of regular inmates. So I'm just going to review it. The first 3 pages just tells you of the incident which I reviewed. So I'll just give you a little bit of that. It says Graydon Parker was admitted to the detention center at 12 p.m. on Saturday, May 20th for breaking a window. He said God told him to break the window. When he entered the jail, he was in an acute manic state, experienced psychiatric emergency. Despite his medical needs, defendants from the Wayne County Sheriff's Office and Southern Health Partners did not complete a medical or mental health screening for Mr. Parker and did not contact the detention center physician, Wayne County EMS, or any other health care provider. Instead, Parker was sprayed multiple times with mace, placed in a 6x7 segregation cell for 9 hours. His manic symptoms progressed, and he never received any medical care. At night, approximately 9:37 p.m., Parker was brought by defendants Xavier Lee, Brent Woodall, Jose Arias, Robert Hines, detention officer Nathaniel Nell, and he was brought to the shower where he was again sprayed by pepper spray and hot water. He became upset in the shower, and then he was laid on the floor naked and breathing heavily, bleeding, talking incoherently. Instead of obtaining medical treatment for him, defendants, the same guys, decided to hog tie Mr. Parker on his stomach by pulling his arms and leg behind his back and applying handcuffs, leg shackles, and a hobble restraint. While restraining him, they applied the hog tie. They sprayed him once again with mace, forced him on his stomach, used a Nova electronic stun shield to shock him, and pushed him down on his back, shackled his legs behind his back, applied a handcuff to his wrists, kicked and stomped him, held him face down with their bodies and legs, punched him multiple times in the head and face, and kneed him, shocked him with a Taser X-26 stun gun, and applied a chokehold. Defendant Charles Granger watched the defendant's officers attack Mr. Parker in the shower room. Granger assisted the officers with their efforts to hog tie Mr. Parker and encouraged them to knock him out. While the officers were restraining Mr. Parker on his stomach, Granger shot Parker again with the stun gun 2 times and deployed electronic barbs, the needles, into him twice. Once Parker was unconscious, Defendant Lee secured the handcuffs behind Parker's back, applied the hobble restraint from the shackles to the cuffs, and left him on his stomach in a hog-tie position. Several minutes later, Defendant Granger realized that Parker was turning blue and not breathing. Parker suffered sudden cardiac arrest from the blunt force trauma, physical restraints, spray and conductive electrical weapon applications, and possible asphyxiation while being held in a prone position by defendants Lee, Woodall, Hines, Ariel, Neal, and Granger. Parker was taken to the hospital where he was pronounced dead at 2:35 May 21st, 2017. So that is a nutshell summary of what happened. Now, as you see, these guys just literally killed that man in cold blood. To my knowledge, all of the defendants in this case, I don't think they were ever charged with anything criminal, but I don't think they are working. But as it was told to me, Lieutenant Ryan Narron, which you will get his part and why he is also culpable and probably should not be working, as well as Mr. Pierce. He should not be a sheriff after what you're going to hear in this complaint. And so it goes on to talk about how the plaintiff is bringing these actions against the Wayne County, which is the defendant. The whole county is a defendant, Sheriff Pierce and Southern Health Partners, for their policies and customs of deliberate indifference to the serious medical need for prisoners like Jerry Parker with mental disorders. Pretty much, they don't care about having those policies in place to address this man's mental health need while he's having a mental health crisis. Then it also goes on to list each individual defendant as well, saying that this is a wrongful death suit. And it goes on to list, once again, each individual defendant. It gives a little bit of history about Mr. Parker And then it goes on to talk about Sheriff Pierce in Wayne County. It said Wayne County is responsible for developing an adequate medical plan to provide medical care to prisoners at the Wayne County Detention Center, which they did not do. And Wayne County had the final policy making authority. Then it goes on to talk about Sheriff Pierce. Pierce was the final policy making authority at the Wayne County Sheriff Office. In paragraph 46, kind of sums it up. At all times relevant to this action, defendant Sheriff Pierce had final policy making authority for the training and supervision of the detention officers and deputy sheriff at Wayne County. And he had a policy or custom of indifference to the serious medical needs of prisoners, like Jerry. So basically, they're holding him accountable because of the culture that he established of his officers not caring about, the prisoners and treating them that way. Paragraph 48 says, for a policy or custom of deliberate indifference to the inadequate training of detention officers and the risk of possible asphyxia while restraining a prisoner. And asphyxia is him suffocating when he was hogtied and not able to breathe by these defendants. And so I'm going to move on. All right, it lists Willie D. Sparks, Ryan A. Narron as a defendant, the current Lieutenant Ryan A. Narron, and Santagata and Lewis Garner. And it says on May 20th, 2017, Sparks, Narron, Santagata, and Garner worked for the day shift from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. at the Wayne County Detention Center. And that is, and they're going to review their part in this later on. Hopefully I'll be able to get to that. But it says during their interactions, defendant Sparks, Narron, Santagata, and Garner acted in accordance with Sheriff Pierce's policy or custom of deliberate indifference to the serious medical needs of prisoners with mental health disorder. That means these guys, once again, ignored the need to call this guy some mental health, but they went on to treat him as if he was drunk. Now, the next defendant in the lawsuit is Southern Pines. Now, once it does go on to mention all the other 6 guys that I mentioned the other day, in which we've already reviewed their culpability in the manner. But just let me dig into this because Southern Health Partners is a private medical corporation that Sheriff Pierce contracted with for a price of about $400,000 a year. And what they were supposed to do is to keep mental health or nurses on staff to deal with this. But they said Sheriff Pierce deliberately hired them because of their policy of being affordable. Why was they affordable? Paragraph 94 states that from September 2014 to 2017, to the day of Mr. Parker's death, they did not employ any mental health providers at the Wayne County Detention Center and only had a single LPN without any on-site medical supervision present at the detention center from 8 a.m. until 12 p.m. Monday through Saturday. So this is basically, once again, fraud as well. They are paying this company $30,000 a month just to have an LPN there 4 hours a day, 20 hours a week. This is fraud. This is Sheriff Pierce doing that. Where my water at? I know I should have got some water, but this is Sheriff Pierce is doing. That he's cutting corners, but paying this company, I'm pretty sure he gets a kickback. Now, this is listed in the indictment. He should not be our sheriff any longer. If this is the type of company he's contracting with that is allowing these things to go on when there is no medical supervision, they're paying almost $500,000 a year for this quote unquote company to provide mental health service. But let me get on into the actions. Excuse me, I gotta get some water. Hold on. Y'all bear with me real quick. I should have had that already ready. Y'all forgive me. But I've been looking over this document. And so it also calls out Christina Driver because she was the nurse on hand, but she was not there. She did interact with Mr. Parker, but she did not do her necessary due diligence in taking care of him. Now, this is also something that is telling. They said on December 2018, a year after his death, the plaintiff sent a certified letter with HIPAA authorization to defendant Sheriff Pierce, requesting a complete copy of Mr. Parker's medical and health records. Meaning, what did y'all do while he was there? On January, a month later, Wayne County responded with a copy of Sheriff Pierce's letter, and it did not produce any medical or health records from Mr. Parker because they didn't do anything. They didn't do anything for him. So that is very telling that Sheriff Pierce knew that they were supposed to have medical personnel on duty at all times, and he knew they didn't. And this is why these deputies, Narron, as well as other deputies, treated him as such. Now I'm going to read what happened that day. It says Sheriff once again contracted with them for their affordability, knowing that they didn't provide any on-site medical supervision from 8 a.m. until 12 p.m. And then they go on to talk about Miss Driver. But let me get to the meat of this. Y'all just bear with me, because this is going to be very telling about the other people involved with this as well. He was talking about, it goes on to talk about how Sheriff Pierce did not train his deputies in some of the courses that were mandated. Just like this one right here, paragraph 146 says, did not provide any in-service training to detention officers at Wayne County Detention Center on mental health screening, assessing and identifying mental health problems, handling prisoners with mental health issues, mental health crisis intervention, or use of force on mentally ill prisoners. Now, that's why you will see as listed in this complaint as current Lieutenant Ryan Narron saying, oh, he's just drunk. Now, he was working the day shift, so he was able to tell the night shift, oh, he's just drunk. No health screening policy whatsoever. And so, none of this was in place before his death. And it just goes on to talk about, Sheriff Pierce not being prepared for mental health patients. Now I'm going to read this real quick. And this gives a detailed summary of the events leading up to his death. They're talking about the morning of Saturday, Jerry Parker was at his residence. He broke the window. Deputy Tyler Kelly responded from Mr. Parker was wearing a burgundy shirt, light shorts, burgundy hat, and a necklace with a sink stopper attached to it. Mr. Parker told Deputy Kelly to go ahead and lock me up. Now, this is the guy who had the mental problem. Go ahead and lock me up. I knocked that window out because God told me to. Mr. Parker was laying on his stomach with his hands under his chin and face, half the deputy handcuffed. Mr. Parker refused to stand up. Deputy Kelly had to pick him up off the ground and escort him to the patrol car. Mr. Parker refused to sit in the patrol car. When Deputy Kelly used a pressure point technique, Parker sat down in the car. He wrapped his feet around the passenger seat headrest and kicked the computer. Deputy Kelly struck Mr. Parker on the shin and knee area with the flashlight, and Parker moved his legs back. While driving to the Wayne County Detention Center, Deputy Kelly heard Mr. Parker singing and mumbling. He also observed that Parker had a 1,000-yard stare, which I talked about in the last video. Upon arrival at the detention center, Mr. Parker laid down in the patrol car. Wayne County deputy assisted Kelly with forcibly removing Mr. Parker from the patrol car. Deputy Mitchell allowed Mr. Parker's head to hit the pavement when he was pulled from the patrol car. Mr. Parker was not provided any medical care, basically treating this man like, hey, whatever, we're the deputy, so we can treat you any kind of way. Now, here's where current Lieutenant Narron comes in. Parker was escorted by Deputy Kelly and Defendant Narron into the Wayne County Detention Center and brought before Magistrate Howard. Mr. Parker was charged with injury to personal property and resisting officer, 2-class misdemeanors. Now I'm going to move on. Upon information and belief, Deputy Kelly informed defendants Narron, Sparks, Santaga, and Garner of his actions with Parker. So if this deputy who went and arrested him told these guys Parker's actions, they should have known, if properly trained, that this guy was having a mental health episode. But as we see from this complaint, that these officers were not properly trained because of Sheriff Pierce's custom and policy of deliberate. Deliberate means on purpose indifference to people with these mental health conditions. I'm gonna read a little bit more of this just to show you what happened and why Lieutenant Narron as well should not be a lieutenant presently. The booking officer was A.L. Barron, and the search officer was Defendant Narron. Defendant Sparks, Defendant Santaga, and detention officer, so I guess they're not a defendant, Sean Daughtery provided assistance during the booking and admission process. Defendant Narron searched Mr. Parker in the intake area and removed his belt. Mr. Parker was mumbling to himself, and the detention officers could not understand him. After the search, Mr. Parker went limp while sitting on a bench, slid to the ground, and laughed. He began yelling incoherently and not following verbal commands by the officers to stand up. When 3 officers tried to stand Mr. Parker up, he went limp on the floor again. Mr. Parker's behavior was abnormal, but he did not take any aggressive actions toward the officers. Ronnie Levi Barnes. Anybody knows Ronnie Barnes? He's the I guess the county drunk like Otis and Mayberry, who's always in jail. They said he has his own locker downstairs. Ronnie Barnes, a prisoner who was in the present intake area, observed that Mr. Parker was yelling, talking out of his head, and he sounded like a weirdo. According to Defendant Narron, now current Lieutenant Narron, the detention officers thought Parker was drunk. Mr. Parker was not drunk. He was in an acute manic state and experienced a psychiatric emergency at the time of his admission. And throughout his detention, Mr. Parker had a serious medical psychiatric condition and needed to receive a proper medical assessment and emergency care, which they didn't have in place because Sheriff Pierce was paying this company $400,000 to have a LPN there Monday through Friday, 8 to 12 p.m. 20 hours a week. Give me a job for 20 hours a week, $400,000. I might not make any more videos. I'm just saying. However, they said if Mr. Parker's, Mr. Parker's mental health condition was so obvious that a detention officer, a LPN, and lay people would have recognized that it required the attention of a doctor or treatment. If he had received emergency treatment, Mr. Parker's mental health condition would have been stabilized by a shot of Haldol, an antipsychotic medication, and Ativan, a sedative medication. Once his condition was stabilized, Mr. Parker would have received appropriate medications and monitoring for his mental health disorders. Despite Parker's serious medical needs, the detention officers misperceive him as a disruptive inmate and an intoxicated inmate beyond reasonable comprehension levels. In accordance with Defendant Sheriff Pierce's mental health screening policy, the Wayne County detention officers did not complete a mental health screening for Mr. Parker. Instead, they just beat him to death. The Wayne County detention officers also did not complete a receiving officer screening form or Medicaid, right? So instead, now here's once again where Lieutenant Narron comes in. And the guy, once again, I think he was one of the guys who were listed in the article. He made it a point to mention, hey, Ryan Narron was there too. Now he's a lieutenant, but his mother is a major. So, you can do the math if you want to. Instead, Defendant Santanaga and Narron, at the direction of Defendant Sparks, sprayed Mr. Parker in the face with mace several times. Parker was dragged by the officers to the shower room. The shower room was small with a long, narrow shower adjoining it. The shower room was accessed through an entry door from a hall that connected to the intake area. On the other side of the shower room, there was an exit door that led to the hallway with 8 cells, including that. In the shower room, Defendant Garner joined Defendant Sparks, Defendant Santanaga, Defendant Narron, and Detention Officer Daltrey. So evidently Daltrey didn't do nothing because they keep calling him Detention Officer, not Defendant. The detention officers undressed Mr. Parker in the shower before Parker lay face down on the floor while Mr. Parker was on the ground. Here is your current lieutenant, Mr. Ryan Narron. Sprayed him in the face with mace again. And the defendants, Narron and Garner, attempted to apply pressure point techniques. The detention officers physically moved Mr. Parker to the shower, and he lay on the floor face down. The officers heard Mr. Parker saying, "I'm an American, shoot me," and other unintelligible things. When Parker would not wash himself or stand up, the detention officers shot him with their water hose. Once they hosed him down, the detention officers rolled Mr. Parker onto a blanket and dragged him naked out of the shower for confinement and disciplinary segregation, where he stayed for 9 hours until, they placed him in the cell. Now, at approximately 12:25, Jerry Parker was placed in the cell by Defendant Sparks, Defendant Narron, Defendant Santanaga, Defendant Garner. Mr. Parker stood up in the cell and began talking to himself. He was again naked with nothing on him. And Defendant Driver, that is the nurse, observed the defendant officer's interaction with Mr. Parker in the intake and shower areas, and she talked with Defendant Narron. Defendant Jane Driver saw Mr. Parker's unusual behavior, and she's aware that The officers had sprayed him several times. Defendant driver knew that the detention officers had not completely received. Now, this is the lady who was supposed to be making this $400,000 a year with this company. But she did not complete a health screening form as well. The shift ended, and she stayed on at work because Parker had been admitted to the detention center where no health providers were present. So this starts to talk about driver, the nurse, and her negligence with him. But before the day of the shift ended, and once again, you can read this whole thing. I'm not going to go through this, but I just want to give you certain points of it because I'm only on page 30 and it's 64 pages. Before the end of the day shift, Defendant Sparks, Narron, Santanaga, and Garner directly observed Mr. Parker several times each. Mr. Parker was facing or leaning on the wall, mumbling unintelligible words to himself every time that these defendants was walking by. Now, paragraph 2013, based on his observation, Defendant Narron, current Lieutenant Ryan Narron, determined that Mr. Parker was drunk or mentally unstable, and when they were about to get off, that is what they told the officers who were coming on. At the briefing, Defendant Narron, which is now current Lieutenant Narron, informed Defendants Lee, Woodall, Arias, and Neal about Parker's mental health condition and behavior during the day shift, including his determination that Parker was drunk or mentally unstable. Now, we all know what happened during the ensuing night shift, where this man was clearly beaten, tased to death, suffocated. But I just want to, mention, two of those names because they are still employed. Evidently, Defendants Lee, Woodall, Arias, Hines, and Neal, all of those guys, according to some of their Facebook pages, they are not there. So they paid for, their sins or indiscretions. But apparently Sheriff Pierce, because all of these things that are listed in this complaint show his culture. And once again, I think about the killing of William Shane Jones. I can imagine, and even though he wasn't the sheriff that time, but it's just a culture of, okay, we do what we want, and nobody, we're above the law because we are the law. But definitely, I think this should be, once again, be revisited. Sheriff Pierce has got to go because if he allows this, also, once again, he is the main policymaker. He sets the tone. He's sitting there contracting with these people because they're affordable and they only have a woman there from 8 to 12, 4 days a week, 5 days a week, 4 hours a day. That's 20 hours a week. But we are, taxpayers are paying these people $400,000 a year to make sure that they do what they're supposed to do with these inmates in the jail. And as we clearly see from this incident, they haven't. He just has to go. And also Lieutenant Narron. He was kind of hidden from this, but, he was hidden from public scrutiny. But in this complaint, he's listed as a defendant. So he definitely has some culpability in this matter. And keep in mind that the plaintiff here, Mr. Parker's mother, Miss Margaret Jean Kelly, was awarded $985,000, $15,000 short of $1 million. And so, and once again, the claim is for deliberate indifference to serious medical needs by individual defendants. Now, each of those are individual defendants, as well as sheriff and the county, and those two entities. The Wayne Surety Company, I think that is the company that we had the insurance by. But it's apparent. Like I said, Defendant Sparks, Narron, and Santanaga and Garner knew that Mr. Parker's mental health condition required medical attention and that the substantial risk of serious harm existed to Mr. Parker if his needs were not treated. And so they continued to place the blame not only on the individuals who committed the physical acts that led to Mr. Parker's death, but also the individuals that could have got him the help before, his situation escalated to the fact that, the 6 men mentioned in the other video would be responsible for his eventual and eternal demise. And so, if anybody wants, like I said, this thing is 64 pages long. I just wanted to give you like some of the tidbits in it, but there's a lot of things that show, that our sheriff is definitely not, not running a tight or reputable ship. And, he still has people who are employed that were complicit in the death of this man. And once again, I think when the guy when the guy called me, and I asked him why is he still working? He's not fired. No, because his mother, Major, I guess Narron, is a major now at the jail. So, evidently he has some preferential treatment where he was able to keep his job. Now, I don't know about Santanaga and the other day shift workers that were there. I don't know if they still have their job, but I'm pretty sure that those 5 individuals were relieved of their duties. But nevertheless, there's a culture of that. Like that just doesn't happen out of the blue. Or we're just gonna beat this man up. No, they've been beating people down that jail since I was going down there, because I was beaten by 2 detectives in 1998 and nobody said a word, So, once again, I know these things goes on, but this is proof that these things goes on. And, definitely I think Sheriff Pierce should be held accountable. But yeah, I know this situation is not over, because I'm still receiving bits and pieces of information as well. But we're going to look into this more. Hopefully somebody share this with Sheriff Pierce, Lieutenant Narron, and, even whoever else that is down there perpetrating these acts. Because this is something, once again, this is listed in a 64-page document of these people being defendants. However, they are still in their position where they are responsible for the wrongful death of a mentally ill man, and responsible for costing the county of Wayne almost $1 million in damages. So 919-587-7782. Taylor Publishing House at Gmail. Y'all probably can tell I'm sleepy right now, so I'm about to go give me some rest. But I thank y'all for tuning in. Make sure y'all like and subscribe to the channel. Peace and blessings.